Sharan Kumar Limbali argues that Dalit literature is unique because A. This brings out the Dalit reality, which is liminal in time and space. B. This has unique historical and ideological concerns. C. This offers literary and cultural representations of marginalized and dispossessed people. D. This brings out narratives and discourses of pity. E. It uses disrespectful and offensive language towards revered figures. Answer 1. A, B, and C. Only now, let's unpack why. Dalit literature uniquely presents Dalit realities and historical concerns and highlights marginalized voices. Dalit literature comes straight from the heart of Dalit writers. It's all about showing the real struggle and the deep-rooted societal issues Dalits face. These stories aren't just for reading. They're calls for change, shedding light on the harsh realities Dalits endure. The cool thing is, these texts toss out old-school rules about what makes good literature, setting up new standards that really matter. Critics sometimes get stuck on universal beauty standards when looking at Dalit lit, but this genre is breaking the mold. It draws its inspiration from the tough lives of the oppressed, and that's where its true value lies. Traditional beauty ideals like Satyam, truth, Shivam, goodness, and Sundaram, beauty, don't really apply here because they've often just served the upper castes, leaving others in the dust. Sharan Kumar Limbali shakes things up by suggesting we look at literature through the lens of social upliftment. In this new view, true beauty means treating everyone equally, no matter their class or background. Liberation becomes the new goodness, and seeing the humanity in everyone defines modern beauty. Dalit aesthetics stand on pillars of equality, freedom, justice, and brotherhood. Take Akarmashi by Sharan Kumar Limbali, for example. It's a raw take on being seen as illegitimate and dealing with caste oppression, not to mention the sexual exploitation that's woven into the societal fabric. And there's Juthan by Valmiki, which throws light on the gut-wrenching school discrimination Dalit kids face, using leftovers as a powerful symbol of humiliation. Dalit literature isn't just about writing stories. It's about demanding recognition for centuries of oppression and serving as a mouthpiece for Dalit voices. These writings aim to shake up the existing social order that allows caste discrimination to thrive. It's educational, it's liberating, and it really makes you rethink how we critique literature. By sharing their pain and pushing for justice, Dalit stories are key to understanding their world and sparking real change. This genre is like a rebellion in words, highlighting the urgent need for society to shift its perspective. These narratives are crucial. They redefine what's beautiful and pleasurable by showcasing the struggle and strength of Dalits. For the UGC NET English exam, understanding this transformative power of Dalit literature and its unique aesthetic criteria is crucial. It's all about seeing literature as a tool for societal change. Question 62. Which of the following statements best describe Anna Karenina's situation and worldview? A. Anna is deeply committed to the family and children. B. Anna's choices were more an outcome of passion and instinct. C. Anna accepted the exile to which she was condemned. D. Anna's passionate spirit and determination to live life at her own terms make her iconic. E. She became a victim of rampant patriarchal forces. Answer 3. A, D, and E. Only. Let's dig deeper into these choices. Anna's narrative combines deep family commitment, personal determination, and struggles against patriarchal pressures. The right picks that sum up Anna Karenina's situation and how she sees things are statements A, D, and E, just like Leo Tolstoy shows us in the book. A. Sure, Anna really cares about her family and kids, but throughout the book, she's torn between this duty and what she really wants, showing us the kind of pressure women faced back then. D. Anna's all about living life her way and chasing what makes her happy, even if society gives her the cold shoulder for it. Her strong-willed nature really stands out as she tries to make it work with Vronsky. E. Anna ends up getting the short end of the stick in the society she's part of. Her affair throws her into a social no-man's land and messes with her head, shining a light on the unfair double standards and how little freedom women had back then. Why the other choices don't fit. B. Saying Anna just goes with her gut and doesn't think things through really sells her short. She's actually quite thoughtful about her tough choices, even if she's fighting against what society expects. See, Anna doesn't just roll over and accept being shunned. Her battle with being cut off from society and how it affects her mentally is a big part of the story, showing how she fights her fate, not just accepts it. Anna Karenina, written by Russian bigwig Leo Tolstoy and published in 1878, is a real heavy hitter in literature. Tolstoy himself said this was his truest stab at writing a novel. Starting out in serial form from 1875 to 1877 before hitting bookshelves, it really grabbed people with its deep dive into betrayal, faith, marriage, and the social scene of Imperial Russia. The story revolves around Anna Karenina and Count Alexei Vronsky's affair, which stirs up major gossip in St. Petersburg and sends them packing to Italy to escape the drama. But when they come back to Russia, things only get worse for them, highlighting Anna's growing sense of being alone and paranoid. Alongside Anna's story, we also follow Konstantin Levin, a landowner working through his own issues of love, faith, and what he's supposed to contribute to society, kind of mirroring Anna's troubles, but with a shot at finding himself. The book doesn't just stick to personal drama, it also digs into Russian agriculture, politics, and class differences, painting a rich picture of 19th century life and the struggle to stay true to yourself when society is breathing down your neck. Tolstoy's book is a key resource for exploring themes like gender, social class, and personal happiness for exams like the UGC NET, where understanding historical and societal impacts in literature can really give you an edge. Question 63. Choose the correct option in the new historicist reading of Dalit writing. A. Dalit writing does not essentialize Indian society, culture, and identity. B. Dalit writing has inflected the imminent meta-narratives. C. There is no single location of Dalit writing. D. Dalit writing is only a political category. E. Dalit writing is not grounded in history. Answer 1. A, B, and C. Only ready to explore why Dalit writing challenges broad generalizations, impacts overarching narratives, and transcends geographical boundaries. Dalit writing really shakes things up in conversations about Indian society, culture, and identity by questioning and changing the usual stories and refusing to pin these concepts down to one simple idea. It shines a light on the diverse and complex experiences of the Dalit community, breaking up the usual single-story narratives about Indian culture and society. By tweaking the big overarching stories, Dalit writing brings in a fresh perspective on the usual historical and cultural talks, offering different views on these stories from the standpoint of those pushed to the margins by caste discrimination. Plus, the variety in Dalit literature, coming from different languages and regions across India, shows that there's no one-size-fits-all place for Dalit writing. It pops up in various cultural, linguistic, and regional settings, each adding its own flavor to the larger Dalit conversation. So, options A, B, and C are spot on as they really capture what Dalit writing is all about in a new historicist reading. Why the other choices don't hit the mark. Option D. To say that Dalit writing is just a political label is way too simple and overlooks the depth and richness of Dalit literature. Sure, politics is a big theme, but Dalit writing also touches on personal, cultural, and historical stories that go beyond just politics. Option E. It's off the mark to say that Dalit writing isn't tied to history. A lot of Dalit literature is deeply connected to the historical struggles of caste oppression and discrimination, telling the history of the Dalit fight for rights and respect. Dalit literature has really made its mark as a key genre in Indian writing, highlighting the lives and struggles of the Dalit community against centuries of caste oppression. Starting in the mid-20th century, this literary movement has spread across various Indian languages, using a bunch of different literary styles to call out caste injustices and add to Indian literary traditions with its diverse stories. Big names and movements like the Dalit Panthers and thinkers like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar have played a huge role in shaping its growth. What's cool about Dalit literature is how it refuses to just simplify Indian society into basic stories. Instead, it offers a complex look at big narratives and shows how many different Dalit voices there are across various cultural and linguistic landscapes. This literature really digs into how caste, class, and gender overlap, especially through Dalit feminist views, making it super important in questioning and reshaping the usual discussions on identity, culture, and resistance in India. For the UGC NET exam, it's key to grasp how Dalit literature not only challenges existing narratives, but also enriches the cultural and historical understanding of India, offering crucial insights into societal structures. Which among the following statements are true? A. Miscegenation is a sexual relationship or marriage between the people of the same race. B. Creole is a language that has evolved from a pidgin but serves as the native language of a speech community. C. Indian tribal people are popularly termed as aboriginals. D. Mulatto is a person of mixed white and black ancestry. E. Australian indigenous population is termed as Red Indians. Answer 4. B and D. Only here's the correct scoop. Creole languages emerge from pidgins to become native languages, and mulatto describes mixed race heritage. We see complex themes of race, identity, and cultural heritage mixed with historical and social issues in various books dealing with topics like miscegenation, Creole identity, Aboriginals, mulatto, and Red Indians. Miscegenation, or when people from different racial backgrounds have kids, pops up a lot in stories and often highlights the social tension and prejudice around racial mixing. A standout story is Desiree's Baby by Kate Chopin. Here, miscegenation drives the story forward, revealing deep-seated racial biases in a Louisiana Creole community. Creole typically refers to folks of mixed European and African roots, especially in old colonial spots. Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys dives into the Creole identity through Antoinette Causeway, a white Creole woman in Jamaica. She's caught up in figuring out who she is against the history of British colonialism. Aboriginals, the original folks of many lands, often show up in books that aim to voice their stories and reclaim their history. Carpentaria by Alexis Wright paints a detailed picture of an Aboriginal community in Australia, mixing myth, history, and current issues to showcase their rich culture and the challenges they still face. Mulatto is an old term for people with both white and black ancestry, and it explores the social effects of being mixed race. In Langston Hughes's story Passing, the main character deals with his mixed identity, trying to figure out where he fits in America during the early 20th century. Red Indians, now an outdated and offensive term for Native Americans, have often been depicted in ways that either romanticize or misrepresent their cultures. However, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie gives us a real and detailed look through the eyes of a young Native American dealing with life between his reservation and a mostly white high school. For the UGC NET exam, understanding how these themes of race and identity are woven into the fabric of literature is crucial. It helps us see how narratives form around societal structures and personal experiences, offering insights into broader cultural and historical discussions. Question 65. Identify the correct options in the Theorization of Nation by Homi K. Bhabha. A. Nation arises from similarities among people. B. Nationalist representation is defined by ambivalence. C. Nationalist representation engages with two contradictory modes of representation. D. Nationalist discourses are split by a disruptive double narrative movement. Nation is a stable and fixed category. Answer 3. B, C, and D only. Let's dive into the explanations. Bhabha highlights the inherent ambivalence and contradictions in nationalist discourses, emphasizing their complex and unsettled nature. Hybridity. Bhabha got this idea from Edward Said, and it's all about how new cultural forms pop up from mixing different cultures, especially after colonial times. He says colonial pasts are still very much part of today's world, messing with and changing how we see interactions between cultures. Using a post-structuralist approach, Bhabha shakes up colonial studies by pointing out how colonialism keeps shaping complex mixed cultural identities even now. Ambivalence. Bhabha uses the term ambivalence to talk about how conflicting ideas can coexist within a culture, especially in places that were colonized. Here, identities are torn between original cultural roots and the cultures forced on them by colonizers. This split identity makes colonial power kind of delayed and always up for negotiation, showing up through a cycle of repeating and differentiating. Ambivalence shows the weird double nature of colonial power. It's both original and copied, powerful, but also dependent on the cultures it tries to control. Cultural difference, enunciation, and stereotype. Bhabha draws a line between cultural difference and cultural diversity. Cultural difference isn't just about recognizing variety, it's about the active clash and meld of cultures that sparks new ways of understanding and expressing culture. This clash and interaction is what he calls enunciation, which is key to recognizing and respecting cultural differences, breaking away from fixed ideas of what culture means. However, stereotypes mess this up because they stick to one rigid image, blocking the lively expression of cultural and racial identities and keeping ideas of otherness simple and unchanging. For the UGC NET exam, understanding these concepts is vital because they show how literature and culture aren't just about the stories or traditions themselves, but also about how these stories and traditions interact, conflict, and blend in the context of history and power. These ideas are super important for the deeper, more complex layers of cultural studies. Third space. Think of the third space as a kind of fuzzy zone that pops up when different people or cultures bump into each other, kind of like what urbanist Edward W. Soja talks about with his idea of third space. It throws a curveball at our usual ideas of cultural identity, which we often see as something solid, unified, and rooted deeply in history. Instead, this space is where all the action happens in terms of shaping culture. It messes with the usual story of the West that moves smoothly through time. Baba says, cultural statements and systems are constructed in this contradictory and ambivalent space of enunciation. So basically, it shows us that cultures aren't pure or original because they're always being made and remade right in the thick of conflict and mixing. Enunciation here means that culture is always on the move, and even familiar signs can be grabbed, twisted, rethought, and understood in new ways. Mimicry. Mimicry, as Baba sees it, taking cues from Lacan, is like a tricky kind of copying where the colonized take on bits of the colonizer's culture. It's not about blending in perfectly, but about standing out in a subtle, kind of sly way. This happens because the colonizers want the colonized to be like them, but still a bit different, creating what Baba calls a double articulation that both fits in and pushes back. Mimicry is like showing only part of the colonial subject, shaking up the colonizers' control by playing with their expectations and showing the mixed signals within colonial conversations. It flips the script, making the watcher the watched, and messes with the whole idea of a single, solid identity by pulling it away from its roots. Through this, mimicry both nods to and undercuts colonial power, giving us a clever look into how control and resistance play out. For the UGC NET exam, these concepts are super important because they help us see literature and culture from a more critical and dynamic perspective. Understanding third space and mimicry can really deepen your insight into how cultural identities and power dynamics are continuously being negotiated and reshaped, which is key for anyone diving into post-colonial studies. Analysis of the question. The explanation here lines up with answer 3. B, C, and D only, using Homi K. Bhaba's ideas. He dives deep into how national identity and representation work in post-colonial spots, showing why choices B, C, and D make sense, but A and E don't fit with his theories. B. Nationalist representation is defined by ambivalence. Baba talks about ambivalence to point out how different, often clashing views exist together within a culture, especially in post-colonial societies. These places have split identities, so when it comes to nationalist representation, it's not simple or agreed upon by everyone. Instead, it's full of internal clashes and tension. C. Nationalist representation engages with two contradictory modes of representation. From Baba's viewpoint, using concepts like cultural difference and enunciation in the third space, national stories aren't straightforward. They are built from back and forth between different cultures. This means national representation is naturally contradictory, mixing the colonizers' and the colonized's perspectives, which keeps the identity and authority always up for negotiation. D. Nationalist discourses are split by a disruptive double narrative movement. Baba's ideas on hybridity in the third space show that national stories aren't just one clean narrative. They're broken up by multiple stories reflecting the tangled realities of post-colonial societies. This disruption comes from the lasting effects of colonialism, which mess up the straightforward flow of history and identity. Contrast with A and E. Nation arises from similarities among people. Baba would say this is too simple. He argues that national identities are more about how different, sometimes opposing experiences shape a country, rather than just similarities. E-nation is a stable and fixed category. Again, Baba would disagree here. His discussion on hybridity, ambivalence, and the third space paints nations as evolving, dynamic entities. His work highlights that national identities are always being reshaped by cultural mix-ups, making them anything but stable or fixed. In summary, this breakdown supports the chosen answer by laying out how Baba sees national identity as complex and full of debates. With his concepts like hybridity, ambivalence, cultural difference, and the third space, he frames national representation as something that's always up in the air, contradictory, and disrupted by different narratives, matching up with choices B, C, and D. For the UGC NET exam, it's crucial to grasp these nuanced views to understand the layered and contested nature of national identity in post-colonial contexts. Question 66. List 1 contains novels while List 2 features names of their authors. It's important to carefully read each list before matching. List 1, novel A, Waiting for the Mahatma, B, So Many Hungers, C, The Sword and the Sickle, D, Distant Drum. List 2-1, Babani Bhattacharya, 2, R.K. Narayan, 3, Manohar Malgaonkar, 4, Mulk Raj Anand. Ready for the matchup? Here's the answer. A, Waiting for the Mahatma matches with 2, R.K. Narayan. B, So Many Hungers can be paired with 1, Babani Bhattacharya. C, The Sword and the Sickle goes with 4, Mulk Raj Anand. D, Distant Drum links to 3, Manohar Malgaonkar. Let's dig into why these are the right matches. Waiting for the Mahatma is a 1955 book by R.K. Narayan. The story's about Shriram, who just finished high school and lives with his grandma in Malgudi, a made-up place Narayan often uses. Shriram's life flips when he crushes on Bharati, a girl all in for Mahatma Gandhi's Quit India movement. He jumps into the movement, which worries his grandma and sends him into new rural settings, sparking some funny mix-ups with the locals. After a jail time, he and Bharati meet up again, get engaged, and face India's 1947 partition and Gandhi's death in 1948. Babani Bhattacharya, a notable writer from South India, kicked off Gandhian fiction with his first book, So Many Hungers, in 1947, right after India got its independence. Set during the Bengal famine and the Quit India movement of 1942-43, this story teaches its characters Gandhi's principles. It follows Kajoli, a village girl who, despite being super poor, decides against prostitution and sells newspapers instead, standing as the Gandhian new woman. At the same time, it tells about Rahul, a Cambridge-educated astrophysicist who struggles with Western culture and intellectualism, but ends up embracing nationalism and a village-focused economy, largely influenced by his granddad Devata, a hardcore Gandhian leader who's big on hunger strikes and introduced satyagraha in his village. The Sword and the Sickle by Mulk Raj Anand came out in 1942 and wraps up a trilogy that includes The Village and Across the Black Waters. Like his other books, it dives into social and political stuff, this time focusing on the rise of communism. Fun fact, George Orwell picked the title for this book. It was a hit both in the UK and the US back then. Manohar Malgaonkar, 12th of July 1913 to 14th of June 2010, was a jack of all trades, an Indian author writing in English, army officer, big game hunter, civil servant, mine owner, and farmer. Here are some of his novels. The Seahawk, Life and Battles of Kanhoji Angry, 1959, Distant Drum, 1960, A Combat of Shadows, 1962, The Princes, 1963, A Bend in the Ganges, 1964, Spy in Amber, 1971, The Devil's Wind, On the Life of Peshwa Nana Sahib, 1972, Shalimar, 1978, a novelization of the film Shalimar. For the UGC NET exam, understanding the work and contributions of these authors to Indian literature, especially in the context of historical and societal changes, is crucial. Their novels not only enrich the literary landscape, but also serve as reflections of the dynamic socio-political changes in India. This makes them an important part of studying modern Indian literature. Question 67. List 1 features characters and List 2 contains the novels they belong to. Make sure to connect the character to their respective story correctly. List 1, A, Seth, B, Okonkwo, C, Offred, D, Winston Smith. Stir 1, The Handmaid's Tale 2, Beloved 3, Things Fall Apart 4, 1984. Here's the matching scoop. A, Seth is from 2, Beloved. B, Okonkwo comes from 3, Things Fall Apart. C, Offred is a key figure in 1, The Handmaid's Tale. D, Winston Smith is central to 4, 1984. Let's dive into the explanations to see why these connections make sense. Toni Morrison's 1987 book, Beloved, picks up right after the American Civil War. It's about this Cincinnati house haunted by a ghost with a vendetta. The place belongs to Sethe and her daughter Denver. Sethe had a brutal past as a slave. Morrison pulls from the real-life story of Margaret Garner, a slave who ran away to Ohio in 1856 to tell a 1873 tale about the lasting damage of slavery and the hunt for identity and a place to call home. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, out in 1958, was a game-changer in English African literature. It paints a detailed picture of life in pre-colonial Igboland and how everything got turned upside down with the arrival of European colonialists and Christianity. Through Okonkwo, a big shot in the Umofia clan, Achebe explores Igbo culture, its values, and the clash of old versus new, spinning a story of cultural shakeup and personal loss. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, released in 1985, shows a dark future where the Republic of Gilead, a theocratic state, has taken over the United States. Offred, the narrator, tells us about the handmaids, women forced to have babies for the state's bigwigs. Atwood sets up a dystopian scene that digs into power, gender, and fighting back in a totalitarian regime. George Orwell's 1984, written in 1949, throws us into a future with Winston Smith, just a regular guy trying to get by under Big Brother's heavy-handed rule in a dystopian world. Winston, the main guy and someone we can all see a bit of ourselves in, fights against the constant watch and lies of a totalitarian state, pushing for personal freedom and truth in a world all about making everyone the same. For the UGC NET exam, understanding these novels is key because they tackle heavy themes like identity, freedom, cultural conflict, and power dynamics. These books are not just stories, they're insights into different times and places, making them crucial for studying literature's role in reflecting and shaping society. Question 68. In List 1, we have stories, and in List 2, their respective authors. Matching these correctly is crucial to understanding the literary connections. List 1 story: A, A Simple Heart, B, An Outpost of Progress, C, 6 Feet of the Country, D, A Horse and Two Goats. List 2, 1, Joseph Conrad, 2, Gustave Flaubert, 3, R.K. Narayan, 4, Nadine Gordimer. And here's the answer. A, A Simple Heart was penned by 2, Gustave Flaubert. B, An Outpost of Progress was written by 1, Joseph Conrad. C, 6 Feet of the Country is the work of 4, Nadine Gordimer. D, A Horse and Two Goats comes from 3, R.K. Narayan. Let's explore why these matches are spot on. 3 Tales by Gustave Flaubert, which came out in 1877, bundles up stories like A Simple Heart, St. Julian the Hospitalier, and Herodias. These tales dive into stuff like dedication, legend, and historical drama. Joseph Conrad's An Outpost of Progress, penned in July 1896 after his stint in the Belgian Congo, first popped up in Cosmopolis magazine in 1897, and then made it into his 1898 book Tales of Unrest. The story throws light on the dark sides of colonial exploitation and moral breakdown. Nadine Gordimer from South Africa nabbed the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1991 because her writing really digs into the tough topics of morals and racism, particularly against the apartheid scene. Some of her big hits include Burger's Daughter. She was also a key player in the African National Congress and even gave Nelson Mandela some advice during his 1964 trial. Her short stories like Face to Face, 1949, The Soft Voice of the Serpent, 1952, and 6 Feet of the Country, 1956, are pretty impactful. R.K. Narayan's A Horse and Two Goats and Other Stories, which came out in 1970, with some cool illustrations by his brother R.K. Laxman, includes 5 stories, with the main one being A Horse and Two Goats. This particular story is a funny take on a mix-up between an American tourist and Muni, an Indian goat herder, showing just how wide the cultural gap and communication hurdles can be. For the UGC NET exam, diving into these works is crucial because they explore significant themes like cultural clashes, historical context, and societal issues through literature. Understanding these narratives helps grasp how literature reflects and critiques societal and cultural dynamics, which is a big deal for literary studies. Question 69. List 1 has texts related to Kashmir and List 2 includes their authors. It's essential to know who wrote what in the realm of Kashmiri narratives. List 1 text. A. The Collaborator. B. The Garden of Solitude. C. Roll of Honor. D. The Half-Mother. List 2. 1. Amandeep Sandhu. 2. Shahnaz Bashir. 3. Siddhartha Gigu. 4. Mirza Wahid. Let's reveal the correct answer. A. The Collaborator is a work by 4. Mirza Wahid. B. The Garden of Solitude is created by 3. Siddhartha Gigu. C. Roll of Honor is authored by 1. Amandeep Sandhu. D. The Half-Mother is penned by 2. Shahnaz Bashir. Here's why these matches are the perfect fit. Mirza Wahid's first book, The Collaborator, 2011, takes us deep into the tense setting of Indian-administered Kashmir, right up against the line dividing it from Pakistani Kashmir. The story gives us a peek through the eyes of a young guy caught up in the conflict, doing a chilling job for the Indian Army, counting dead militants after battles. Siddhartha Gigu, a multifaceted Indian author and filmmaker. Siddhartha Gigu, who studied English literature at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, has really made his mark in both Indian literature and cinema. His books include The Garden of Solitude, 2011, and A Fistful of Earth and Other Stories, 2015. The latter even making the long list for the 2015 Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award. His story, The Umbrella Man, won the 2015 Commonwealth Short Story Prize for Asia. Gigu also has some poetry out there with collections like Fall and Other Poems and Reflections, published by Writers' Workshop in Kolkata. Amandeep Sandhu, Reflecting Punjab Through English Prose. Born in 1973, Amandeep Sandhu is a Punjabi writer and journalist who writes in English, adding some rich flavors to the literary scene. His notable book, Roll of Honor, got a shout-out with a nomination for the Hindu Literary Prize for Best Fiction in 2013, showing his clout in today's Indian literature scene. Shahnaz Bashir, A Voice from Kashmir. Straight out of Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir, Shahnaz Bashir has made a name for himself as a strong Kashmiri novelist and academic. His breakthrough book, The Half-Mother, 2014, not only snagged the Muse India Young Writer Award in 2015, but also got translated into languages like Marathi, Telugu, and French, proving it hits home with a wide audience. His next book, Scattered Souls, 2016, has been a hit for its intense depiction of Kashmiri life, drawing comparisons to big names like Saadat Hasan Manto and Anton Chekhov, and it even topped the charts in Kashmir, according to the Kashmir Observer. For the UGC NET exam, diving into these works is crucial because they tackle important themes like conflict, identity, and cultural nuances through compelling narratives. Understanding these authors and their contributions provides insights into the complex layers of regional and political contexts in literature, which is super valuable for literary studies. Question 70. List 1 includes terms from cultural and literary theory, while List 2 features the theorists who coined these terms. Matching them accurately sheds light on foundational concepts. List 1 term A. Heteroglossia, B. Structures of feeling, C. Ambiguity, D. Discourse. List 2 coined by 1. William Empson, 2. Raymond Wagton, 4. Michel Foucault, and the answer is A. Heteroglossia was introduced by 3. Mikhail Bakhtin. B. Structures of feeling was conceptualized by 2. Raymond Williams. C. Ambiguity as a concept is identified by 1. William Empson. D. Discourse is a key concept from 4. Michel Foucault. Let's dive into the reasons these theoretical connections are essential. Mikhail Bakhtin came up with the term heteroglossia to talk about how a single language can have all sorts of different ways of speaking and writing packed into it. He first brought this idea into the spotlight with his 1934 piece, Discourse in the Novel. What he means by this is that literature isn't just a bunch of words thrown together. It's full of diverse voices and styles that reflect different social and cultural views. In social theory, when we talk about discourse, we're not just talking about chit-chat. Thanks to thinkers like Michel Foucault, discourse is understood as pretty much any way we communicate. It's a big deal because it shapes how we see the world and plays into who gets to hold the power in deciding what's true or important. On a basic level, discourse involves sharing info and how this interaction influences everyone involved, which is key to understanding how meanings in language shift and change. William Empson shook up literary criticism with his book, Seven Types of Ambiguity, which hit the shelves in 1930. He breaks down 7 different ways poetry can be ambiguous or have multiple meanings. These range from using metaphors that sort of match but not quite to downright contradictions that let you peek into a writer's complex thinking. This book is a toolkit for digging into the layers of meaning in poetry. Raymond Williams tossed out the idea of the structure of feeling during discussions in the mid-20th century about how artistic and moral values fit into democratic societies. He argued that we should see values as something people continuously shape together, not just rules handed down from above. Williams wanted to balance personal creativity with community values without being all authoritarian about it, highlighting how culture and morals are always evolving collectively. For the UGC NET exam, understanding these concepts is super important because they show how literature and communication aren't just static. They're shaped by and shape social contexts, cultural backgrounds, and power structures. This understanding helps peel back the layers of how texts and communication work, making these theories crucial for anyone diving into literary and cultural studies.